5:30. Am I too early? 5:30, yes. That's what mine said. Have you record of the attendance?
Yes. Yeah. As far as I know, Councilor Gatwick will be on her way shortly.
We'll be here.
Yes?
And have you heard
I
from
haven't heard from the others.
Chambers or, there's Councilor Gatward right there. We won't start
Yeah,
it.
John won't be.
Pardon?
John Wheat won't be here.
Oh.
I know.
we-
I've heard. Not really know.
Hey, John.
Council of the County of Brant is now in session. Welcome members of council and staff members. We have no guests other than, well, we don't have any guests attending this meeting because it's staff and council. Welcome. The agenda is before you. Is there any member wishes to add to the agenda? Place an additional item? None. May we have a motion to approve the agenda? Thank you, Councillor Pierce. Second by Councillor Cardy. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest. And next, we will have a motion to go into committee of the whole so that there can be open discussion between members of council and staff. Councillor Simons moves, thank you. Councillor Gatward. Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. And I call on our CAO to start with, who will introduce.
Well, I'll introduce our chief building official.
Or any-
Mr. Andre Dervell. Andre had, some of you probably heard this presentation. It was given to the development industry up at the sports complex a month or two ago now. Andre, and it was excellent. And it was a request that he do it again. So here we are.
Welcome. Please proceed when you're ready to make your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. In May, we did a presentation, Let's Talk Building, to the general contractors, builders, and designers and architects. And we went through the process of what it takes to get a building permit, the stats, what's happening in the future for the county of Brant in the building industry, and the standards and code changes. And it was well received. And so as a request, I'm doing an education session for council just to bring them up to speed on what's been happening in our building division. I know you get monthly stats, but I want to make you understand the pros and cons of what we do, and hopefully we can go. You're welcome to ask questions throughout the presentation, and I'll start off. Thank you. We have a mission statement. It was developed a few years ago, and it's the backbone of what we start off with. Most of you have read this mission statement before in my presentations that I've done. But again, I just want to go over it again. It's to educate and enforce the Interior Building Code, to ensure safe construction of all buildings that will enhance the quality of life for those who work, play in the County of Brant, and allow them to participate as fully as possible as aspects of community life. My staff reads this, we go through this, and we make sure that we follow this mission statement. What are our responsibilities? Yes?
I was just going to ask you on that last third part of the mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
Who is the them referred to?
We allow them, that's everybody. The them is referring back to the public. So what are some of you know what our responsibilities are, but I just want to make sure that we can just go through this. One is responsible for public safety. That's our number one goal. That's our number one job. And so it's pretty self-explanatory. Issue building permits. Yes, we do that. Complete building inspections as well on new construction. Educate the public, which we do with education centers and things like that. Inspection of existing buildings. This deals with unsafe conditions. Emergency management. We work closely with the fire department, and we have an emergency management plan in place. So when something happens, we're generally the last group of people to get involved. We make sure the buildings are safe for people to return in, those type of things. So as an example, when we had that windstorm a couple years ago, we had a huge tree fall into a house in Harrisburg. And so the fire department informed us, we went out that evening, looked at it, got the people out of their homes, because the tree went right through the master bedroom. So we deal with those issues after the fact, so. We have enforcement of orders. We go to court, I take people to court, we charge them for failing to comply with the orders that we issue. And we have a very good success rate for some reason, so, which is good. Court prosecutions as well. Property standards. We help out with property standards, with bylaw enforcement, and if they ask us to go out, we will go out and do it with them if they don't understand what's going on with the building. So we work together as a team. Some statistics. This is the good news part. As you can see, since
Just back a shade, Andre. The number 2 issue building permits. What's the relationship between the building permit and the planning application? Which comes first, or do you do both at the same time? How does that work?
Okay, so we'll talk about, I can break it down into a couple of different planning issues. One is severances. We look at when someone comes in a trial, he wants to sever off a lot, planning department informs us through the application process, and we review and give our comments prior to if there's any conditions that we require on that application. As for site plan, as for subdivisions, the subdivisions get all done prior to, and then the last stage is issuing the building permits. So you may have one big planning application, but I can deal with 200 to 300 building permits after the fact. So that's that relationship.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Councilor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Andre, can you just help me out a bit about how does that division between you guys and bylaw work, or how do you work together? Let me ask you. Like if there's somebody complaining about a barking dog, I don't expect you to go out there. I expect bylaw to do it. If there's a complaint about somebody occupying a house before the occupation permit's been issued, do you go out there, or would a bylaw
No,
officer?
and that's still with new construction, so we would look after all the enforcement of that. Bylaw would not get involved with that,
Okay.
because the building has a building permit and it's active.
Okay, so let me step back even further. In your previous slide there, you talked about property standards, and who decides who goes out and checks out a property? Because
So how property standards work is that bylaw will get a complaint regarding the condition of a building. They will go out and do their initial investigation. And in most cases, they can follow the property standards bylaw and issue the orders under the property standards to get some of the stuff. What they do is when they find something that's a little bit more complicated, where there's mold growth or anything else, then or we have a hoarding issue, that's when they bring us in, because I have more powers under the Building Code Act than under property standards to do things a lot quicker or get people moved out of the house. So that's where we work together as a team.
so was it always the case of them calling you in for additional help, or is it sometimes you guys get a complaint and say, that's better dealt with?
Yeah, sometimes we get the calls in and then we forward it off to bylaw enforcement to look at those kind of issues. Let's say someone's got a shed that's falling apart, that type of thing, we'll have bylaw enforcement go out and look at that.
Councilor Gatlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The one picture in the previous slide looks like a grow-up, and have we had many of those that you've had to inspect after the law enforcement has cleared everything out? Have we had many instances of those in our county?
We've only had one this year,
One this year?
yes.
In the past, we've had them as well?
Yes, we have, yes. We average probably about one a year, if that.
One a year, if that, okay. I was just curious, thank you.
So moving on to statistics. As you can see, the good number is we've done almost, if you add this year's already, we're probably over $800 million in construction value since 2004. We've built over just about 1,700 single-family dwellings, and our total dwelling units are 2,200 units to date. We haven't even included this year yet. Also, if you look at the inspection process, we record all our inspections, and you can tell in the last few years, because the increase, that our inspections are climbing up, the number of inspections we do in a year. And we generally have about 500 construction projects on the go at the same time. Yes?
Sorry. Councillor Simons.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter. Inspections. Is every inspection done walking through the premise and checking the inside, checking the outside to make sure that everything is done properly to what is supposed to be inspected?
Yes.
At every house and every building, every structure?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Miller again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Andre. To Andre. How easy is it for the building department or building division to ramp up?
How easy is it to ramp up? Well, we can work with overtime for a bit, and then, but as we see the peaks continue on, we'll be adding additional staff. I did a previous report a year ago indicating that we will be looking at hiring more staff as the increases of applications come through. And I'll be talking about that. There's another slide talking about the future of the department. So,
Because from what we've seen, it looks like you might have to think about that fairly soon. So,
yeah, to be honest, I'm looking at, is it just a spike and it comes back down because of one or two subdivisions and then it just sort of levels off? Or is this going to be a continuation of a steady growth, and we have to look at that?
Councillor Gatler.
There's one column that says SP.
Swimming pools.
Never thought of that.
Thank you.
As you can tell, looking at the map, we have permits. This is last year. We have permits here. All 6 corners are all over the place. From Paris down to over here, that's a 40-minute drive. So if we're trying to coordinate with our inspections, if the inspector's going out, does he have more in that area instead of driving back and forth all the time, wasting a lot of travel time? And we are improving on how we do that. Because if he's only got a few inspections out here in the afternoon, he could be there for 2 inspections, and he's gone for the whole afternoon. It all depends on how long he's going to be at the inspection. See if there's any difficulties. So when he has 10 or 12 inspections to do, we all try to help out in the area that's got the most, and we look at those on a daily basis. But as you can see, most of the growth is in this corridor here and in the St. George area. And the different types of construction that we look at, from farm buildings to housing to industrial and brownfields. Who are our customers? Homeowners, right off the bat, they're our customers. Contractors, developers, designers, architects and engineers, and I'll explain the difference. Designers are the ones who have a building code identification number, they've written exams, and they take responsibility for the drawings, and the code requires people to hire those people to do their plans from now on. Other county departments, federal, provincial governments, stats, CAN, MOE, MOH, the whole alphabet there pretty well, M&R. They're the majority of the ones that we deal with. Once in a while, we'll get an odd one from maybe if we're near the airport, we'll get something from Transport Canada or something like that. Outside agencies, GRCA, Long Point Conservation Health Unit, Impact, Terrion, and Source Water Protection, which is fairly new. And you, as council, we consider you as part of our customers. So how do we communicate with our customers?
Councillor Pierce.
Sorry, if I could, sorry, you don't pass there, just for my own sake, if we've got like, in these subdivisions and that sort of thing, how many inspections does a house usually have to go
Good.
through? And like, you can quickly give me an idea, and at what stage? I know like with electrical and plumbing and that sort of thing, but can you just give me an idea of how many times you would have to go back to a house? Because the reason I'm asking that is something you alluded to earlier, it's something that Rob had talked about in the planning meeting, is the fact of, you know, trying to get these developers to have a dozen homes ready for inspection rather than one and one and one. So I'm just curious as to how many times you have to go back to a house.
Generally, I have a thing on inspections, but generally we do about 10 inspections per house.
10.
And maybe more in the rural area
Yeah.
to do with the septics.
And you figure an hour?
Yes, an average on an hour each. And that includes travel time. So, but as an example, when I was looking after Adidas, I was there all afternoon. But I was doing multiple inspections from framing to plumbing, structural, HVAC, that type of thing.
Councillor Simons.
So the cost recovery on that would be through the permits?
Yes,
Okay, and it's total cost recovery?
total cost recovery. Communicate through emails, telephone, texting, paper, web page. And if you look, most of our, if we took this is just an average project, 55% of our time is in person with those individuals. You know, coming in at the front counter, dealing with them, site inspections, dealing with them. Our next is email, and that number is growing, and so is texting, and as well as increasing. So that we're adapting to the technology that's out there. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't use the web, and we're looking into that. It's unfortunate because with our website, it's more than 3 clicks to get into our website for the building division, so we have to look at that. One of the improvements that we will be doing is our inspection phone line starting August 1st, and that is the number. They must give us 24 hours notice. The inspections will start from 10 a.m. and go to the rest of the day, but if they call after 3 p.m. that day, it gets pushed on to another 24 hours. And this is to help us coordinate our staff in doing the best possible job in time management in doing inspections. Before, right now, it's same day, you call before 10 o'clock and we'll be out there. With the increased volume of inspections, we cannot meet that standard anymore. So the code allows us 48 hours, but we should be able to handle this with no problems. And it's just, again, educating the public to use the inspection call line. Those messages will be picked up on a regular basis to determine, and then we can plan our inspections for the next day.
Councillor Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so the phone calls that come in on the regular phone line, they'll be integrated into that
Yes.
inspection system?
Yes.
Okay.
Councillor Miller.
Those time periods, those are mandated by the province, yes?
No. It's through what we do.
Does the province mandate certain?
Inspection timelines? Yes, they do. And I'll have a slide on that, and then we can go through there.
When we get there, if we don't meet the timelines, too bad, so sad. What are the repercussions?
If they can call and complain to me and say that the inspector wasn't there within the time frame as specified, or And if it continues, they can take it to the Building Code Commission and get it reviewed through there. Or they can forward their complaint through council, and I'd have to explain to council why we're falling behind in inspections. In most cases, the contractors are calling a day in advance, so we're just sort of semi-formalizing it a little bit. Permit application timelines. This is one of the key things that we try to explain to a lot of people. First set is for housing, small buildings. When the application is complete, we have 10 days to issue that permit. For small farm buildings and other buildings besides residential, we have 15 days. Commercial, large buildings over 600 meters squared is 20 days, and then complex buildings and fairly large buildings is 30 days. So a complex building would be like our new fire halls that'll be coming online within the next year. Those, I have 30 days to review those plans and issue the permit. Or
Police station?
and the police station as well, so. Anything to do with, as an example, earthquake resistance or high wind resistance, those are complicated buildings, so we have qualified people to review those.
Councilor Cardy?
Thank you, Your Worship. One quick question in regards to that with the, like, say, the new fire hall, or the police station, I should say. Are there certain different rules and regulations that you would have to follow in your procedure to look at those facilities? Is that correct? Like provincial laws that are specific to those buildings?
Yeah, the building code has specific things in those buildings for fire alarm systems, that type of thing. Whether the building requires to be sprinkled or not, how's the earthquake and high winds and structural components are going to be put into those buildings. We check all those. And it's all listed in the building code.
Councilor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Earthquake, like, any building that goes up now has to have earthquake resistant something?
Not every building, no.
How does it, like houses don't, and something like the Adidas factory, or is it just over a certain size they have to? How does that work?
And it depends on the occupancy of the building. So let's say like an arena, like if you look at the Twin Pad, it was designed for earthquake resistance.
Really?
Because we can use that as an evacuation center.
That was going to be my next question. Is it because it can be used for that?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Because we want those buildings, we call them post-disaster buildings, and because they got to stand up. As an example, if you looked at Godridge, they lost all their post-disaster buildings through that tornado. Took out the fire hall, the police station, the municipal building, like it was just gone.
Everything's
So-
gone.
Our application flow chart, and I'm going to spend some time with this a little bit. Oops, what happened there? This is the owner's responsibility. Zoning, getting all what we call applicable law requirements before they apply. And that's a challenge, because they call us, we explain to them what exactly they need for their specific property. So we make sure that they understand, and we have forms that we hand out, that this is in contact information where they need to go and get the answers that they need to before they apply. Otherwise, when they come in and do their application, we see that they're missing something, it's deemed to be incomplete, and I can do a couple of things. I can take it in and just put it aside, or I give it right back to them. I prefer to give it back to them so that way they don't come back and complain to you, well, I've dropped my permit off, where is it? Even though they don't, they misinterpret that, we've taken it in, but we've also explained to them, given them a form and saying that it's deemed to be incomplete. And you have to provide us with this additional information. Then we have all the requirements for a building permit, drawings, everything else. Goes through zoning again and just plans review. Then we go through the other phases of building clerk issuing the permit, making sure all the paperwork is still in there. Then we go through all the inspections. From there, the building clerk gets all the information and does the final occupancy sheets. Now, what we're doing is everything is all in city view, so we'll scan documents, put them in city view, so our building permit tracking system's got all the documentation electronically. That's pretty well.
Is stormwater management somewhere in these charts?
Can you repeat that, please? Stormwater management is, we look at drainage and grading on the plans, especially at the severance stage, and then when we confirm that the overall drainage and grading conforms to those plans. It's the same thing with the subdivisions. There's an overall drainage and grading plan for each lot. When they come in, we just sort of check them out quickly, seeing that the grades meet those. When it comes to the commercial industrial buildings, we check those off at site plan control, and then we have securities against that. If they don't comply, then we'll inform the planning department or the engineering department that things are not what it seems to be, and then we'll write contractor, developer, or whatever, owner a letter saying you have to fix this, otherwise we'll go in and do it for you under the securities.
Councilor Keller.
Thank you. Is Ms. Hyman, our building clerk, and Mr. Gallagher the counter tech?
Yeah, that's an old, like, I haven't updated that. We have Jill Bouchard and Debbie Heimbach are now our counter techs. Patrick has improved in that we've got him out in the field again. And he helps out in the counter as well.
Thank you.
Application forms. We don't make our own forms. The province tells us these are the forms that we have to use. We used to have our own forms, but because it was so chaotic from one city to another, the same contractor trying to build and different things, so the province said you're going to standardize everything. So this is the typical basic application form, general information, just basic description, the square footage or the square meters, the cost, and then all their personal information. On the second page is just filling out who your builder is going to be, and just a yes or no checkbox, and then they sign this legal part of it, saying that the information they provide is true and all that. So this is a very easy, simplified form. Doesn't take much to fill this out. Yes, and we still help people fill them out. So we have information. I was talking to you about between designers and architects. When the designers come in and draw up the plans, they have to fill out their portion of the form and sign off and give me their BCIN number, because we have to verify whether they're qualified to do the drawings or not. And then we have the sewage system designer as well. For rural areas where they put in septics, those designers who design septic systems have to fill this part out as well. Starting January 1st this year, new mechanical ventilation forms, and these are very complicated. And we have the general person who's designing their own house, which they can still do, cannot do this. They have to hire a certified person in heating and ventilation to fill out these forms. And that's through the ministry, that's not through us. And there's two ways. There's what we call a prescriptive way, and then an optional design phase. So like an Energy Star house or something like that. When we get into large buildings, we look at, this is a general review commitment form where the owner fills out this portion, and all the architects and engineers and other consultants fill out this section here. This is mandatory by code, so that way we can refer to the consultant if there's a problem on site, and he has to do inspections and provide us with reports. The next is incomplete permit application. So if we have an incomplete permit application, we fill out this form, check off what box, add a little something extra, and then send it back to the individuals and say, it's just a record of saying this is what you're missing. Now, the only form that we have that the province allows us to do is a demolition form. And we're going to try to, it's 2 pages right now. I'm looking at doing it as a 1-page thing. So basically, it's just to sign us from hydro, gas, all the utilities, just make sure they're all cut off and that type of thing. So it's important that those things get done.
Councillor Simons.
So the demolition, construction, I guess, the end results have to be inspected also?
Yes. Yes, we ensure that the services are good. They have to contact us to do an inspection to see that the water and sewer lines are,
Sewers are all out, but I mean,
yes.
just getting rid of the debris and whatnot.
That's up to the contractor, but as an example, Mr. Kennedy's applied for his demolition permit for Mechanic Street. Well, I need, before I can issue that permit, I need to know, he has to do a hazardous materials list, what's in there, all right? For several reasons. One, the code requires one, and 2, for health and safety of our inspectors. All right. Then also, 2, he needs an engineer to tell us how that building's going to be demolished. About 3 years ago, there was a demolition in Toronto. Remember, the one building collapsed on the other.
Councillor Pearson.
Mr. Mayor, through you. So when somebody is building a house, they put a building permit up, people can see that. If somebody's demolishing a house, do they have to do the same thing?
Yes, they should be posting their, the law requires them to post their permits.
Okay, because the reason I ask is within the last 2 weeks, there's been 2 houses that are just gone now, one up on Banfield and one down on Washington. And it was like, whoa, because I got a phone call about the one on Washington saying, you know, hey, did you know that house was gone? And it was like there in the morning and gone at night. And I'm like, no, I didn't know that. So they should be, or they have to, or?
Well, it's kind of hard to put a permit up on a building that you're going to demolish.
Well, true, but they usually put it to a tree or a sign or something,
Yeah,
right?
but we're not there to enforce that type of thing. Yes, it is a requirement, but we have to think of the practicality of the situation as well. It's like issuing a building permit to a brand-new house, but we don't see the permit until it's framed, right? That's posted, because you got excavation foundations, all that type of thing.
So if I could, Mr. Mayor, through you, just a little addition to the one on Washington Street particularly, because of that creek that kind of goes beside it there, is there anything special they have to do with a water source right there that, like, you know?
That would be governed under the GRCA. In general, they usually put a silt fence or something like that, just to protect any washout that may go.
Yeah, okay. Because I don't think that was done. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I was going to ask you a question about the previous slide. You talked about an incomplete application, but I want to ask you, because you talked about a failure. You come out, somebody builds a shed, and you come out and you inspect the electrical, and they have to pay a fee for that, yes?
Well, we don't do the electrical inspections, that's through ESA, Electrical
Okay.
Safety Authority.
What would you, okay, would you do any inspections then?
Just on a shed, yes?
Okay. You come out, they pay a fee to get that done, and it fails. Do you charge them the same thing to come back out?
No.
To fix it?
The permit fee is the permit fee. If we have to go out 5 or 6 times to help them out, that's what it is.
Is that standard practice throughout?
Yeah, that's pretty well standard practice. I do have something in the building bylaw that deals with nuisance inspections. As an example, we had East Forest Homes building a house. I did 5 framing inspections because it failed, and then I sent new East Forest Homes a bill for $500 because it was just additional. They were just not getting it. So it was just like coming out, it's not done. So that's just wasting time and money for everybody.
Okay.
And once they got that bill, they certainly changed their tune.
If I could, through you, your worship, just a question on demolition permits, Andre. At what point and how does that work? If a building is made and built in 1850 or whatever, and there's a demolition permit for it, does that automatically go through the Heritage Committee to see if there's anything of significance, or do you have to refer that, or does that come from, how does that happen? I know a friend of mine was going to be taking down his house after he built his new one, and they had to go through the Heritage Committee, and someone came and looked at it and ensured that there was nothing of historical importance there, anything like that. How is that triggered?
Okay. All demolition permits go through the planning process through Marcus Davidson, and the planner is in charge of that committee. They quickly go out and just take a look, just to take some pictures, and it's done fairly quickly within a few days. But just because a building's old and it's not designated, it can come down. Even if a building is designated, there's certain time frames that they can still demolish the building, but there's still certain time frames under the Heritage Act and Building Code Act to allow them to extend periods of time for any historical research that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And if the building is historically designated under the province, they have to get permission from the province first. Building permit fees. This year we raised our building permit fees. It's been a while. And we only raised the minimum up from $70 to $80 and from $100 to $140 just to cover our basic administration costs. Our overall fees of $14 per thousand has stayed the same. But there's a little caveat that I use sometimes. Where I think the described value of the construction is low, I will assess a construction value that is higher, and they have to pay the adjustment of the permit fee. Now, they can challenge that, and I said, that's fine, but you get a charter accountant, and you will go through all your bills at the end of the day, and if it comes out less, I will refund you the difference. I would say 99% of the time, it's over cost. So I do have that authority under the building bylaw to do that. We also established a standard square footage for housing, and so it puts everybody on the same playing field. Family dwellings are $110 a square foot, and semi-detached and row housing are $90 a square foot. And that's the minimum. If they give us more, we take it. But it puts everybody on the same playing field. So what is a complete application? Well, this is where it gets, it's a long list. It's the application form, designer information. In rural areas, we'd like to have a copy of the deed compared to a subdivision, because we know the subdivision, all the lots are registered. Just to confirm that we are building on the right lot, because there could be multiple severances. Zoning approval, septic application, energy efficiency, mechanical, 2 copies of the construction plans, includes trusses as well. And then the applicable laws have to be checked, and then the public works permits. That's just for a single-family dwelling. And that's the most complicated one that we have. For if we were doing, any questions about that? Because that's pretty well it. So this is a typical site plan for a house. The one on the left there is a rural, which shows a septic, large lot. And then a typical site plan that we get for the subdivisions is on the right. It's just showing the house location and drainage and grading.
Mr. Miller?
Andre, can you just go back to that last one? When you get an application and it's complete, you've got X number of days to get that.
Yes.
But all the other ones, GRCA, MOE, MTO, even our own public works, there's no stipulation for how long they can take?
Nope.
Okay.
That's why they have to get theirs first.
All right.
Because if we take it in and they're still looking for an MTO permit or GRCA, it could take months. And Ministry of Environment, They're looking at 9 months.
I think this has happened more than once. I think the building division has taken the heat for some of these other ones coming in
Yes.
slowly. Is that correct?
That's correct.
From what I've seen, that's happened a couple times. So.
Yes, we try to calm the people down. You need to work with the other agencies first. You know, sometimes we'll call the agency asking them what is the issue with this, so that we have a better understanding what's going on. And maybe we can help them along a little bit.
I think that's important for us.
Because I have no control of what the other agencies do. Because the GRC meet, correct me right, Mark, once a month? Yeah, so if they apply now and they miss their date, they're going to have to wait a full month for the GRCA to review it. If staff reviews them.
Councillor Powell?
Andre, I'm just curious on that site plan on the right side. I notice it's Crawford Place, where we had that berm thing. Now, on the diagram you show, does it show anything about the landforms or just the actual physical structure?
Well, what it shows is it gives us the four corners of the drainage and grading that's been proposed under the subdivision. We got to confirm that the grading works around on the outside of the building. And the top of foundation, just to ensure that the top foundations are the same as what was designed in the subdivision. The detail stuff, let's say at the back, it may or may not be given, but as long as we have the four corners, we can determine that it does comply, because the code says it just has to comply by sloping away from the house and just generally not interfering with the neighbors. That's all the code says. So we just basically review. We do some looking at different drainage and grading issues, and sometimes we spot things that we ask them to look at before we issue the permit. These are typical floor plans, foundation plans, different floors, and sometimes we get a roof plan showing the roof. They can be complicated or very simplified. And just because they're on AutoCAD doesn't mean that the quality is there either. Look at building elevations. Sometimes, and I'll be talking about this in the next slide, we've marked up on this one where we want additional information wall sections, because there's different facades on the building which can affect the construction and spatial separations between other buildings and things like that. So we also, one cross section isn't going to do us on a typical house. Houses are more complicated than they used to be. So they just gave us this one wall section and just a couple of cross section here, and but they didn't take one where it got complicated. There was a deck there, like a second floor deck and stuff like that. We got to know how that's all constructed. And when we call back to the designers and say, you're the owners, you're missing this, well, I'm not paying for that. Or I said, well, that's your issue. We're not going to issue the permit until we know what's going to be built.
Councillor Simons?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. And this is a design question, I guess, to a degree. The open concepts that are really much required and wanted now and desired, does that create a problem with the whole situation as far as structure goes with you? Do you have a certain way it has to be built?
The design is pretty well open, as long as they meet the requirements for beam sizes, things like that. And if they exceed those tables that are in the building code, then they need to get an engineer to size that steel beam for us. So when we go out and site, we know it, we'll check the size of that beam compared to the drawings.
Okay, thank you.
This is, see a lot of this now is floor truss systems, and then the complicated roof truss systems. And when we go out and do our framing inspection, we get the truss package. There's a package, and it shows every individual truss. So that way, when we do our framing inspection, we're up there in the second floor or ground floor, and we're looking at the trusses to make sure the bracing's installed, the truss is installed the right way, those type of things. can we get an application for buildings that are under 600 that are non-residential? These are like small plazas, small farm buildings, outbuildings, that type of thing that are non-residential. And it's pretty well the same thing. We may require an architect or an engineer to sign off. We generally get an engineer, depending on the structure of the building. But it's basically the same type of application, the zoning. The only differences between that is we will require mechanical and electrical drawings. Because we have to check for exiting, exit lights, emergency lighting, that type of thing. And for the small buildings as well, if you look at that little barn building on the right, farm building, we have the National Farm Building Code that we enforce. It's one of the very few federal documents that we're allowed to enforce. And it's unfortunate because they haven't upgraded that since 1995. Site plans for small buildings is we can just get a single individual rural lot with a small building, septic system, parking lot layout, to a bunch of small buildings in an urban area on one lot, and we look at all those as well. And then you can get complicated drawings. This is what we said, under 600 meters square, and this could be a complicated building. Pre-consultation. We've initiated a year ago a pre-consultation process for large buildings for the developers and builders to come in and talk to us about what they need. It does several things: to have a better understanding of the construction project, to avoid miscommunication, review building code requirements and certain issues in detail. And if we pick those things up at the early stage of these pre-consultation, looking at the building, then it cuts back on our time and drawing review later on. And improve plans review time and unnecessary delays. We're one of very few municipalities that do that in the area. So my counterparts in Norfolk they're going to be starting that probably in the fall. It just helps us understand what the project is all about. And we do that also with large farm buildings. We'll have the engineers come in and we'll talk to them about large farm buildings as well. Because sometimes we have issues with exiting. We don't understand the farming operation, so why is this here, why is that there? There are reasons for certain things, and then we can negotiate on how we're going to make things comply. Buildings that are larger than 600, as you know, we've had the Adidas. Oops. That's pretty well our largest project in the county. And then we've got, like No Frills there, grocery store. Again, it's the same application, very simplified. The only things that we need is a general review commitment form. And that's signed off by the architects, and I've explained that before. But again, we go through different other things. The other things that we look at is sprinkler drawings, fire separations, fire routes, adequate water supply for firefighting, all the exiting requirements, and what type of occupancy it's going to be determines on the type of construction it's going to be, whether it can be combustible or non-combustible construction. Again, applicable law applies. When we deal with large farm buildings, all farm buildings that have animal units, MDS and nutrient management is required. And then also we look at where they're going to be located. Are they affected our source water protection? And they get reviewed by them as well. So there's a lot of homework for people to do. The site plan, again, this is Tiger Cat. So all the grading, the parking, stormwater management, where we look at fire routes, we look at where hydrants are located, because they're all required under the building code, distances, that type of thing, where the Siamese connection is, whether the fire department's happy where the Siamese connection is. They may want it in a different location. So we review it with them. And then you have the drawings, and I only did the one, so I guess drawings can get very complicated. One of the things that with large buildings, they have to give us what they call as a building code matrix. This is where the consultant has to fill it out. He has to tell me what he's building, what section of the building code he's building it at, so that when we do our review, we're on the same page. Because I can interpret something different than what the consultant's trying to do. And sometimes we have those discussions. But it has to be filled out. It has to be part, either as a separate sheet or they stick it right on the plan. On-site,
You, Mr. Mayor, Andre, when you get into industrial buildings and you hear about industrial accidents, does the Department of Labor look at the details of how some of these plants are laid out and what the risk might be to an employee?
we only get involved after an accident, unfortunately. The Ministry of Labor will ask us for a copy of the building permits for them to review, and we'll review it with them in conjunction with their investigation. But that's the extent of our involvement. So the Ministry of Labor, they don't get a copy. What they do is every project is a record of site condition through them, so they know what projects are being constructed. So as an example, we just issued one for mezzanine. So we issued the permit, and then the Ministry of Labor showed up with our inspector. It was just a fluke that they both showed up at the same time, and they looked at it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Andre. When I first joined council, there was a lot of concern, it seemed, about people not getting permits in a proper fashion, timely fashion. Do you find that with all these things that you've improved the system on, that it's helped reduce that time element to make people happier getting them sooner?
I think so.
Because I haven't received any concerns to that degree for a long time, so.
And it all starts with the education process. We've gone out and talked to people. We've got the word out. It's all about customer service. It's not the general contractor or the builders that I have the difficulties with. It's the individual homeowners who've never been through this process before.
Yeah.
So when they come to the counter, we take the time to explain the process to them. And sometimes we're at that counter for a half an hour explaining to them. We're taking them into an office and explaining to them what needs to be done and the reasons for this. It makes sense. But again, it does take time. We have to hold hands once in a while, more than often, but that's why they come to us. On-site sewage systems. We average about between 100 and 120 a year, which keeps us busy. And it's from tank replacements to new systems to repairs, from single-family dwellings to industrial, commercial, institutional uses. Again, they need to give us a site plan showing where the location is so we can verify setbacks from wells, ditches, water courses, that type of thing, property lines. They must give us a soils analysis report on the condition of the soils for the septic system, and then a design sheet that we came up with, because the ministry didn't have one. It helps everybody to fill this out, and we know what system that they're designing for. And then these are just the types of inspections that we do. The code changed over the last couple of years, because now you have to put rebar in at the four corners of the septic system, so that way someone could take a radar gun to figure out where the exact location is. Before we didn't have those. So now someone can identify where the actual tile field is before they used to witch it. Some of the witching still is pretty accurate, actually.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Andre. The picture on the right-hand side at the bottom, is that the weeping tile beds?
Yeah, this is called a filter bed. It's a small area, which is probably about the size of this table area. And it's what we call concentrated. The flows go right through different sanding materials that are brought in, and it takes up a smaller area.
Okay, that's the filtration system?
Yes.
Okay. So are we still using the weeping tile system?
We just issued one a couple weeks ago. It's very rare because it takes up a big area.
Oh, yeah.
So, but we had one go in, regular tile bed.
So
and-
is this in place of that?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, and the tertiary treatment units, which are what you see here, you can even get into a smaller area as well. So they're designed so that you don't need an even smaller area, because it all depends on the site and how tight it is.
Because our first house, we wanted to put a pool in, and we couldn't because we had weeping tile.
That's right.
It took up the whole backyard, so.
And we had one last week, someone put in an above-ground pool, and when the guys went out, you put it on top of your septic bed. They had to relocate it.
If they had to relocate it.
It was a big oops.
Oh, thank you.
Prescribed inspections. This is where the code regulates our inspections. And basically, we have 24 hours notice under legislation, and we don't know why they changed it for septic systems, but we have 5 days to go out. The other ones deals with code agencies, and then the period's time shall be begin on the day following the day of the notice. It's very simple, and it does not include holidays or stat holidays. But the code regulates, I could say, we're going to take 2 days. Sorry, that's the way the code reads. But we don't. We want to do a better customer service than what the minimum requirements are. Now, someone's asking me the list of inspections. It's a big list. We use a sticker program. It's green. You can spot it a mile away. You can see them right on the buildings themselves. It proves that we were there. And these are requirements for occupancy, what needs to be done for each of the buildings, and then additional notices for large buildings on top of what this list is. And then I can ask for as-constructed plans. We are now in the process of large commercial and industrial buildings. We're asking them to provide us with as-built drawings on a flash drive so we can store those. So again, coming up with getting together with the technology, so I don't have to get big rolls of drawings and they just give me a flash drive and we have all the drawings of the as-built. So housing, footings, foundations, water, sewer, framing, firewalls, separations, plumbing, underground plumbing above grade, air barriers. That was added 2 years ago. We have to do a special air barrier inspection now to make sure the building is sealed. So all this, so any penetrations that come through these air barriers on the outside are sealed up properly. So again, that's before the masonry or the siding goes on. So it gets pretty tricky sometimes when you got the builders want to keep on going and they forget to call us. Mechanical, we look at ductwork now. Before we just needed to check the furnace size and we look at some of the ductwork. Now we have to check, make sure all the joints are sealed, all those, because all the new requirements under mechanical ventilation systems and energy efficiencies. On-site septic, and then we do an occupancy.
Mayor Donovan, when it comes to solar panels up on the roof, is that a separate component that you have to check or work with?
Yeah, and that's a separate permit, and they need to get an engineer to look at that because what they're doing is adding dead load to the existing roof load. And they have to verify that the trusses can handle that. We go out and check to see that the connections are there, but also too, the engineer will go out and do that. Inspections for Part 3 buildings, which is the large, pretty well the same thing. We look at water supply, stormwater, and then we have sprinklers, fire alarm systems, and then occupancy. So the one on the right here, that's Cobblestone Public School. That's their front foyer. This one here was the Ford dealership. That's Swiss Chalet. Don't know where that one is. Can't remember. Looking to the future. A couple of things that we're going to be looking at is applications and payment online. We've been asked that on several occasions, so we are looking at that, especially when we're getting builders and developers coming from the Toronto area. The large municipalities do this, so we're just looking at that to see if we can do it or not. Also looking at AutoCAD drawing plans review. Instead of having an actual set of drawings that we mark up, those two typical drawings right there are AutoCAD drawings, and there would be a layer for the building officials to make their comments on, and then we just send it back to them. This is, again, getting up with the technology. We do have CityView as our inspection tracking system. There is a component in CityView for the public can track their application and the inspections. We're not there yet, but we should be there within the next 5-10 years. And then the use of drones. We do have James Ricker and Tiffany. They've got the license to run the drones. We are looking at a couple of projects right now with them to do inspections for us with using the drones. And then administration-wise, as earlier explained, we're looking at maybe splitting the department up into full-time plans examiners and full-time field inspectors to provide better customer service. And then I consider my staff as superheroes.
Councillor Miller?
Just use kazoo there for a second there, kazoo, whatever it's called. The great kazoo. What would you see as a layout for your department? Like, would you cram them, if you had a blank slate to work with, would you cram them all in a hallway, or would you, I don't know, would you require more space? Would you have, and which department would you like to be closest, or which department do you work with the most? Public Works, bylaw, planning? Like, if you could, what's the optimal?
We work mostly with planning. And because they do the zoning, they do the severances, the site plan control, we work closely with them. Public Works, we work closely as well, because entrance permits, water and sewer, stormwater management, we look at those, and drainage and grading as well. I'll do it as an example. We have a lady, who, I forget the street name is, they're on the back of Mile Hill Road. They want to put a retaining wall in. And we said, you got to check with Public Works first, because that affects the road construction. And then they found out that, no, you just can't do it. It would have cost her tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, because they just wanted to gain that backyard. So again, we work closely with those departments. With new technologies, we can talk to them. It'd be they're all under one building, yes. There's no question about it. That way I could send somebody, just go down the hall instead of, you got to drive to Burford. That's the reality of it. Like I said, superheroes. And any more questions?
Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, a couple if I could. First of all, thank you very much for this. This was very educational for me anyway. I appreciate the way you did this. And I've made comments before on, PowerPoint presentations and all that kind of stuff. And I want to say that thank you for putting these little types of things in, the zoos and all that kind of stuff. As I said, in the hallway, it sometimes gets a little dry, and to me, that keeps everybody's attention. I never realized how much went into the number of inspections you do, so good on you for that, and also good on you for meeting with these people face to face beforehand to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take a half an hour now to save us both time later. So that's excellent that you're doing that. And then I guess one final question I have, why did you choose Batman?
Because I was sidekick Robin, which is Richard Weehaus. Oh, no.
Councillor Chambers?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment and then a question. My comment is, it seems not that long ago, but when I first started on council, Burford Township had one building inspector.
Yes.
And the building inspector was also the bylaw enforcement officer.
Dog catcher.
He was also the dog catcher, and he was also the drainage superintendent.
Yes, I was one of those once.
And so things have come a long way, maybe for the good.
Right.
The other question that I have is more kind of a comment, I'd just like you to respond to this. A little bit of background. Unsolicited, I received an email last week from a ratepayer concerning the building division. I'm not going to say who it was, but if anybody wants to see the email, it's here. I'm not making this up. The email says this, in part, I still maintain my opinion stated in my earlier email concerning the building permit situation. People consider the term building permit police standard. When the subject of permits comes up, they are no longer considered an agency that assists and protects the homeowner from shady contractors through the building process. They have become feared by anyone thinking of building new or renovating older homes. They have paperwork to be filled out in one hand and the other hand in your back pocket, making it almost impossible to even think of planning any future jobs. I don't know whether that's a common perception throughout the county. I don't believe it would be, but there is a perception of some people. Yes. And this person is not, in my opinion, a bad person, a complainer, that kind of thing. So it relates to customer service as it relates to dealing with the public. So I just would like your comments on that comment and how we can change the perception that this person and perhaps other people have.
Yeah, I gotta think about that. It's not like the old days, and I'm just gonna say that. I'm not bashing what happened previously, before amalgamation or during amalgamation. There's always a bad building official out there it's that 1% that screws it up for everybody else. So when it deals with customer service, raising their voice at a job site, or just being plain rude or not even responsive, that paints a brush on everybody. So we tried, like I said, I have weekly staff meetings. We go over a lot of issues, including customer service and how we deal with the public. And one of those things is people sometimes don't like to hear no. And then they get their backs up. And then they start bad-mouthing us. And then it just continues on and on and on until the issue is maybe I have to go out and talk to them personally and just say, okay, what is really your issue here? Is it a non-compliance issue? Then we need to improve our communication together so that you can get going on with your project. We do have difficult people out there. There's no question about that. We're the enforcement. And it's unfortunate enough that sometimes something happens and people get the wrong impression of us. But that's the enforcement process. It's no different than a police officer, because we are enforcement officers. We are provincial enforcement officers dealing with the Building Code Act. And sometimes when I have to take people to court, it gets ugly. And it's unfortunate that we do have those people. But again, I don't know the situation per se personally, but we try to do our best to accommodate as best we can.
Councilor Cardy.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Andre. Andre, we've had many discussions about things like this. The one question I think Councillor Chambers, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is saying is, people come in and get their permit paperwork and then the next hand we're asking for money. Is there a way that you feel we could better talk to the customer or show them where that money actually goes that we're taking? How is that money being spent? What's the money for? Because I know in the old town of Paris, you'd come in, you pay $50, you get your permit, and away you go, and everybody's happy. But today, there are different rules and regulations that have come up over the past 10, 15, 20 years. A lot of people haven't done anything, or some people haven't done anything in that 20-year period. They come back and they want to put an addition on their house or something, and then they see all these new fees that are new to them but aren't new to yourself or some of the people around the table. So maybe there's a way that we can explain to them what all those fees are or what the fee base is for. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. We do get asked those questions once in a while. Somebody will say, what does this cover? And we take the time to explain to them what the fees cover. Now, there's other fees that we collect that we have no control of, which is development charges. And that's the big fee. And that's what people complain about the most that we get. What do you mean I got to pay $21,000 for development charges? So those are the issues. I just did one for Stubby's, is the quick calculation for their new office building, and it's going to be over $100,000 in development charges. So those are the things that, we get the backlash on right at the front counter, even though we're not the ones, we collect it. We're just a collection fee. But we do explain to people what the fees are for. Any other questions?
And I think,
Thank you for your time.
what we all have to remember is that what's being enforced, because municipalities have all adopted the provincial standards, provincial building code, which is ever changing, constant changes. Oh, we have to wait.
Heather, is the food upstairs?
Pardon?
We're not adjourned yet, but it's downstairs.
Oh, I thought
What is the question?
You tell us, Heather.
And when you do that, when you have another body, which is understandable why it came into use, it's been around for many decades, it's ever changing. The standards change, so that's reflected in the inspections. Thank you very much for your information, Andre. It's very, very helpful to all of us.
And my staff is open to take you on a tour anytime.
Did you move that we resume an open council, and seconded by Councillor Simons? Who was it? Did you have a question, Councillor Ballmer? Pardon?
I had seconded originally.
Oh, you seconded? Well, it does, yes. You seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. That brings us into open session, and that deals with the agenda of the council tonight. Thank you for your attention. It's, as Councillor Pierce has said, I think very, very helpful, especially going through again, especially in view of the many changes. With that, we'll adjourn council and prepare for the next